I never thought a quiet suburban neighborhood could turn into the set of a war movie at 3 in the morning. Our street had always been peaceful, the kind of place where families left their bikes out on the lawn, where kids chalked up the sidewalks, and neighbors waved every evening when the sun dipped behind the rows of maple trees. But lately, there had been tension bubbling underneath the surface. It all started when a group of busybodies claimed they had formed a homeowners association. Now, let me be clear, there was no HOA here. Our subdivision had never voted for one, and legally, no such entity existed in our deed restrictions. But that didn't stop this self-appointed group of community protectors from printing fake rulebooks, slapping phony fines on mailboxes, and strutting around like wannabe cops. They even hired, or pretended to hire, a handful of so-called security guards. In reality, they were just random guys in ill-fitting uniforms, driving around in beat-up pickup trucks with magnetic security stickers slapped on the sides. Most neighbors either ignored them or laughed it off. But when these fake guards decided to make my family their target, the situation escalated into something none of us could have imagined. It started with a letter. A single-page notice stuffed into my mailbox, written in bold, self-important language. You are in violation of neighborhood aesthetics. Your fence does not comply with HOA guidelines. Remove it immediately or face enforcement action. I almost laughed when I read it. First of all, I had built that fence myself, sturdy oak panels with reinforced posts, sunk deep into concrete. It wasn't some rickety eyesore. It was beautiful, strong, and most importantly, necessary. We had dogs, and I wanted privacy. Secondly, there were no guidelines, because there was no HOA. I tossed the letter straight into the trash, thinking that would be the end of it. Oh, how wrong I was. 2 days later, another note showed up. This one threatened fines of $500 a week, escalating penalties, and property reassessment. I snorted. Who did these clowns think they were? The IRS? City code enforcement? They had zero authority. Again, I ignored it. But by the third letter, things had taken a darker tone. Non-compliance will result in corrective action. You have been warned. That one, I kept. Something about the phrasing made my skin crawl. It didn't sound like an idle threat anymore. It sounded like these fake enforcers actually planned to do something. I told my wife about it, and she shook her head, insisting it was just empty intimidation. But my gut said otherwise. So, as a precaution, I set up a few motion-activated cameras along the fence line, just in case these so-called guards decided to act out. And then, 3 nights later, the rumble started. At first, it was faint. A deep, mechanical growl, distant but steady. I stirred in my bed, half asleep, my brain trying to place the sound. Was it thunder? A garbage truck? No. The rhythm was wrong. Then came the metallic clanking, chains, gears, and hydraulics. I sat bolt upright. Do you hear that? I whispered to my wife. She rubbed her eyes groggily. It's 3 in the morning, probably construction somewhere. But construction didn't happen at 3 a.m. in our quiet suburb. My gut twisted as I rushed to the window. What I saw nearly made me choke. Floodlights from 2 pickup trucks lit up my front yard, and standing there like thieves in the night were 4 men in cheap uniforms. But what froze me wasn't them, it was the machine they had brought. A full-sized bulldozer, idling inches from my fence, its massive blade already lowered. My jaw dropped. They wouldn't. They did. With a sickening roar, the bulldozer lurched forward, its blade slamming into the wooden panels. Splinters shot into the air as the posts snapped under the force. My dogs barked furiously from the backyard, my wife gasped in horror, and I felt something in me snap. Those lunatics are bulldozing my fence, I shouted. I dashed for the door, fumbling for my phone at the same time. My first instinct was to call the cops, but before I could even punch in the numbers, I heard another door creak open behind me. "Dad," a sleepy voice called out. It was my son, my 14-year-old. His messy hair stuck up in every direction, his pajama shirt twisted, but his eyes were wide awake, sharp with adrenaline. He looked past me through the window, saw the bulldozer chewing through our property, and his jaw clenched. "They've gone too far," he muttered. I was about to tell him to stay inside, to let me handle it, but before I could get a word out, his eyes flicked toward the garage. And that's when it hit me. The Abrams. Most families had lawn mowers, tool benches, maybe a few bikes hanging from hooks. Our family. We had an M1 Abrams main battle tank. Now, I should clarify, it wasn't just some rusting display piece. Years ago, through a mix of military auctions, private collectors, and a whole lot of restoration work, I'd managed to acquire and maintain a fully functional Abrams. Obviously, it wasn't loaded with live rounds, we weren't insane, but it still had everything else. Working treads, engine, armor, and intimidation factor dialed up to 100. My son glanced at me, the corner of his mouth twitching into the faintest of grins. "They want war, Dad," he whispered. "Let's show them what war looks like." And before I could stop him, he bolted toward the garage. I froze for half a second, torn between yelling at him and laughing at the sheer audacity. But when I heard the roar of the Abrams turbine engine come to life, shaking the entire house, I knew there was no turning back. The fake guards outside had no idea what was coming. The sound of the Abrams turbine engine wasn't something you could mistake for anything else. It was a deep, throaty roar, like a jet engine crossed with a lion's growl, that rattled every window pane in the house. My wife screamed my son's name, but his voice came back from the garage, confident and steady. "Don't worry, Mom. I know what I'm doing." The fake HOA guards outside must have heard it too, because the bulldozer froze mid-motion, its blade jammed against the wreckage of my broken fence. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the faint barking of my dogs and the mechanical purr of the Abrams startup cycle. The so-called guards looked around, confused, squinting toward my house like they couldn't figure out what that sound was. One of them even shaded his eyes against the floodlights, muttering something to the others. And then the garage door began to rise. At first, only the edge of the Abrams' massive front armor plate became visible, gleaming in the artificial light. Then came the wide, menacing barrel of the 120mm cannon, angled upward like a sleeping giant waking from a long nap. The whole tank emerged slowly, the ground trembling beneath its treads. I'll never forget the look on those men's faces when realization hit. Their jaws dropped in unison, eyes wide as saucers. One of them actually staggered backward, almost tripping over himself as he stammered. Is that a tank?" Yes, it was. The Abrams rolled fully into the driveway, my 14-year-old at the helm. His face was lit up by the glowing dashboard controls, and even though he was just a teenager, he handled the machine with a precision and calmness that made me proud, and a little terrified. I ran out onto the lawn, waving my arms. "Son, take it slow. We don't want anyone hurt, just scared off." But honestly, the intimidation factor was already off the charts. The fake guards scattered like cockroaches caught in a flashlight beam. The guy driving the bulldozer slammed it into reverse, so fast it nearly tipped. The other men dove for their trucks, fumbling to start their engines as panic took over. My son, though. He wasn't done making his point. He maneuvered the Abrams forward with deliberate slowness, the treads crushing the already demolished remains of the wooden fence. The tank's barrel rotated with a smooth whirring sound until it was aimed directly at the bulldozer. He didn't fire, of course. There were no shells in it, but the psychological effect was devastating. The bulldozer operator froze in place, his hands trembling on the levers. The glow of the Abrams headlights washed over him, and for a second, he looked like a mouse cornered by a lion. Then came my son's voice, amplified through the Abrams external loudspeaker system. "You've got 10 seconds to leave our property," he boomed, his voice deepened and distorted by the comms system. 10. 9. 8. The guards didn't wait for 7. The bulldozer roared back into reverse again, clanking away so fast it tore ruts into the yard. The 2 pickup trucks screeched backward down the street, their drivers fighting over who could escape first. Within seconds, my property looked like a tornado had ripped through, splintered wood everywhere, tire tracks gouged into the lawn, but the fake guards were gone. My son powered down the Abrams, the turbine winding down like a beast settling back into hibernation. He opened the hatch, poked his head out, and gave me a lopsided grin. "Think they'll send another letter, Dad?" I couldn't help it. I laughed, even though adrenaline was still surging through my veins. "If they do, they'll think twice before acting on it." My wife stormed outside, equal parts horrified and impressed. She smacked my arm and then pointed at our son. "You let him drive the tank." "I didn't let him," I protested. "He just did." She glared at me, then at him, then back at me. "You two are going to be the death of me." But despite her words, I caught the tiniest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. She knew as well as I did that what happened tonight had probably saved us from a lot more damage. Still, as I stood there in the wreckage of my once pristine fence, staring down the tire tracks and splintered boards, I knew this wasn't the end. These fake HOA goons had been humiliated, yes, but humiliation often breeds vengeance. And if there was one thing I understood about bullies, it was this: when you push back harder than they ever expected, they don't just slink away forever. They regroup. They plot. They come back. I put a hand on my son's shoulder as he climbed down from the Abrams. His eyes were still blazing with the thrill of it all, but I wanted him to hear me clearly. "This was incredible," I said. "But it's not over. They'll be back, and next time, we have to be ready." He nodded, his grin fading into something more serious. "Then let's make sure they don't get a second chance." And right then, in the early morning darkness, with the smell of gasoline and crushed earth hanging in the air, I made a decision. If those fake HOA guards wanted to escalate this into a war, then they'd learn exactly how badly they had underestimated the wrong family. The Abrams wasn't just a trophy anymore. It was our line in the sand. The sun came up that morning like nothing had happened, but my yard told a very different story. My once proud fence was reduced to kindling, a shredded mess scattered across the lawn. Deep gouges from bulldozer treads carved through the grass, and the smell of gasoline still lingered in the air. The neighbors began to trickle outside one by one, drawn by the chaos. Some gasped, some whispered, and a few laughed nervously when their eyes landed on the Abrams still sitting in my driveway like a silent sentinel. "Is that really a tank?" old Mrs. Reynolds from across the street asked, clutching her robe tighter around her. "Sure is," I replied without missing a beat. She blinked a few times, then muttered, "Well, that'll keep the Girl Scouts away." Word spread quickly. By mid-morning, half the neighborhood had stopped by to see the wreckage and hear the story. A few shook my hand, congratulating me on scaring off the so-called guards. Others warned me that those men wouldn't take humiliation lightly. And they were right. By evening, I got another letter. This time, it wasn't stuffed into my mailbox. It was taped to the front door with duct tape, jagged and rushed. "This isn't over. You embarrassed us. Pay the fines or pay the price. That was it. No signature, no fake HOA stamp, just raw hostility scrawled in black marker. My wife wanted to call the police immediately, but I shook my head. I had already talked to the sheriff's office earlier that day. Their hands were tied, without clear names or proof beyond guys in uniforms. There wasn't much they could do. But me. I wasn't about to sit around waiting for the next attack. So, we prepared. First, we reinforced the property. My son and I went to work stringing heavy-duty steel cables along the perimeter, anchored into concrete. If anyone tried bringing machinery onto our lawn again, they'd get tangled up fast. Next, I mounted additional motion sensors and cameras, covering every blind spot I could find. The whole place became a fortress, less a suburban home, more a fortified compound. And then there was the Abrams. My son practically begged me to let him practice driving it more. "Dad, if they come back, I need to be ready," he insisted. I wanted to say no, to remind him he was only 14, but I saw the determination in his eyes. He wasn't playing soldier, he was protecting his home. So, under my supervision, he practiced maneuvers in the big empty lot at the edge of town. Forward, reverse, turret rotation, even using the external loudspeaker like a pro. Every time he climbed out of the hatch, he looked taller, older, more capable. But as we trained, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on borrowed time. That feeling proved right 3 nights later. It started the same way, strange noises in the distance, the hum of engines. But this time, it wasn't just one bulldozer and a couple of trucks. No. When I peered out the window at 2:30 a.m., I counted at least 6 vehicles lined up on the street. Pickup trucks, vans, even what looked like a rented tow truck. The fake guards weren't here to mess around. Men poured out of the vehicles, at least a dozen of them. They weren't in sloppy uniforms anymore either. They had black jackets, masks, and crowbars. From the way they moved, they weren't just neighborhood tough guys anymore. They were organized, angry, and ready to do damage. I nudged my son awake. "It's happening again." He rubbed his eyes, then sat up instantly when he heard the engines. "The Abrams." I nodded. This time, though, we weren't just going to scare them off. This time, we were going to expose them. While he scrambled to the garage, firing up the tank, I slipped on my jacket and grabbed my phone. I'd already set up a private live stream feed through the cameras, broadcasting everything straight to a secure cloud server. If they wanted to play dirty, fine, but the world was going to see it. The moment the Abrams roared to life, panic spread through their group. One of the men shouted, "He brought it out again." Another hissed, "Stick to the plan." But their plan crumbled the second my son rolled the tank forward, headlights blazing, turret aimed squarely at their line of vehicles. The street lit up like midday, and their shadows stretched long against the pavement. He flipped on the loudspeaker, his voice booming. "This is private property. Leave now, or you'll regret it." Some of them wavered. You could see it in their posture, the way their crowbars lowered, the way their eyes darted to one another. But a few stubborn ones yelled back, trying to act tough. "You can't scare us with a toy," one shouted. That was a mistake. Because the Abrams wasn't a toy. With a clatter, my son drove the tank forward, treads grinding against asphalt, the turret slowly swiveling until the massive barrel pointed at their rented tow truck. He revved the engine, the growl echoing down the street like thunder. The effect was immediate. Half the men bolted, sprinting back to their vehicles. The rest tried to hold their ground, but their bravado cracked the second my son crushed an abandoned metal trash bin under the treads, flattening it into a perfect pancake. "Still think it's a toy," his voice boomed. The tow truck lurched backward, its driver panicking as he threw it into reverse. Tires screeched, Smoke filled the air, and within minutes, the entire group scattered, their little show of force dissolving into chaos. But as they fled, one man lingered just long enough to shout over his shoulder. "This isn't over, old man. You'll pay for this." And then he was gone, swallowed by the night. The street fell silent again, save for the low rumble of the Abrams and the pounding of my own heartbeat. My son popped out of the hatch, his hair messy but his grin wide. "That's 2 for us, 0 for them." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're too young to keep score." But deep down, I knew he was right. We'd won another battle. Still, war was on the horizon. The fake HOA guards weren't going to let this go. And the next time they came back, it might not just be crowbars and tow trucks. It might be worse. After the second showdown, I knew the fake HOA wasn't going to fade quietly into the night. People like that, cowards drunk on fake authority, don't just accept defeat. They regroup. They plot. And when their egos are bruised, they come back with a vengeance. I doubled down on security. My yard looked more like a fortified compound than a suburban home. Extra floodlights. New locks. Cameras synced to multiple backups. And of course, the Abrams parked proudly in the driveway like a silent warning, "Don't try it." But the uneasy quiet didn't last long. About a week later, I got a call from one of my neighbors. His voice was hushed, urgent. "Hey. I overheard something. Those guys. They are planning to come back tonight. And they are not just bringing trucks this time. They've got friends. Maybe even guns." I thanked him, hung up, and felt my stomach knot. Guns? This had escalated way beyond property disputes. These weren't just wannabe HOA enforcers anymore, they were acting like a gang. And if they were desperate enough, they might do something reckless. I gathered my family in the living room. My wife looked pale but resolute. My son, on the other hand, looked like a soldier ready for deployment. "They are coming back tonight," I said. "This time, we're ending it." We laid out the plan. My son would man the Abrams, as he had before, but this time, would coordinate. I'd stay on the ground, recording everything, broadcasting it live. No more hiding in the shadows for these guys. If they wanted war, the world was going to watch. The night fell heavy and still, like the calm before a storm. Around 2:45 a.m., the first headlights appeared down the street. Then another. And another. Within minutes, a convoy of vehicles crept into view, trucks, vans, even a flatbed hauling some kind of heavy equipment. But what chilled me most wasn't the machines, it was the men. At least 20 of them, clad in black, some carrying bats, others clutching what looked suspiciously like firearms. My son whispered from inside the Abrams hatch, "Dad, they've upgraded." "Doesn't matter," I replied, my voice steady. "We've got the high ground." The vehicles lined up in front of my house, engines idling like predators waiting to pounce. A man stepped forward, the same one who had shouted at me last time. Mask pulled tight, crowbar in hand, arrogance radiating from his posture. "This is your last chance," he bellowed. "Tear down that fence, pay your dues, and hand over the tank, or we'll do it for you." I almost laughed. The fence was already gone thanks to their bulldozer. The dues were imaginary. And the tank. The very idea they thought I'd hand it over told me how delusional they really were. I lifted my phone, live stream rolling. "Everyone watching this," I said loudly enough for the cameras to catch, "these are the fake HOA guards who've been terrorizing our neighborhood. They are trespassing. They are threatening families. And they are about to regret every bad decision they've made." Then I gave my son the nod. The Abrams roared to life. Its headlights cut through the night like twin suns, flooding the street in harsh white light. The turret swiveled with a menacing hum, the barrel leveling directly at the convoy of vehicles. The reaction was instant. A ripple of panic swept through their ranks. Some men shouted. Others ducked behind their trucks. A few froze, wide-eyed, realizing this was no bluff. And then my son spoke through the loudspeaker, his voice booming like the voice of God. "You're trespassing. You've vandalized property. You've threatened my family. This is your final warning, leave now, or you'll regret it." The leader tried to rally his men. "He's bluffing. It's just for show." My son didn't waste words. He shifted the Abrams forward, the treads grinding asphalt into gravel. The tank lurched toward their front line with unstoppable momentum. He didn't aim for the men, he aimed for their vehicles. With a metallic crunch, the Abrams treads rolled right over the bumper of the closest truck, flattening it like paper. The windshield spiderwebbed instantly, the frame groaning under the weight. Sparks flew as metal gave way. The men screamed. Some dropped their weapons and bolted into the darkness. Others dove into their cars, scrambling to peel away. The leader. He stood frozen, crowbar hanging limp at his side, his bravado draining away as the Abrams loomed closer. "Still think it's a bluff," my son boomed. The man turned and ran. Within minutes, the so-called army of fake guards had disintegrated into chaos. Vehicles screeched backward, colliding into each other as drivers fought to escape. The flatbed jackknifed trying to turn, sparks showering as it scraped the curb. One by one, their engines faded into the distance until only silence remained. Except it wasn't silence. It was victory. My son powered down the Abrams, the turbine winding down with a triumphant whine. He popped the hatch, hair wild, face flushed with adrenaline, and grinned down at me. "That's 3 for us, 0 for them," he said. I laughed so hard I nearly doubled over. "You're keeping score again." "Of course," he said. "We're winning." And he was right. We hadn't just defended our home, we'd ended it. Because the very next morning, the sheriff's office showed up at my door. They'd received dozens of calls, not just from me but from neighbors who had filmed parts of the night on their phones. My live stream had already gone viral, spreading across social media like wildfire. The footage showed everything, the threats, the weapons, the vehicles, the retreat. By noon, arrests were being made. The so-called guards turned out to be a ragtag group of con men and ex-cons, hired by a handful of neighborhood bullies who had invented the fake HOA as a power trip. With the video evidence, their entire operation collapsed overnight. The sheriff shook my hand. "You and your boy did this neighborhood a service. But next time, maybe don't roll out a tank unless you absolutely have to." I chuckled. Fair enough. As for the fence, insurance covered the repairs once the culprits were identified. My neighbors even pitched in, grateful that someone had finally stood up to the harassment. But the Abrams, that stayed right where it was. Not because I planned to use it again, but because it had become a symbol. A reminder that no matter how hard bullies push, some families push back harder. And if they ever forgot that lesson, well, the Abrams was always ready.